In this episode, we're going to make the idea of controls feel concrete, because privacy programs often talk about controls as if they are obvious, when beginners are still trying to understand what a control really is. A control is anything an organization uses to reduce risk, but that simple definition hides an important truth. Not all controls work the same way, and not all controls fail the same way. Some controls prevent problems, some detect problems, and some help you respond when problems occur anyway. Some controls are technical, some are procedural, and some are organizational, and strong privacy management relies on combining them rather than betting everything on a single layer. The goal today is to understand control types by looking at their purpose, their strengths, their limitations, and their typical failure modes. When you can think this way, you stop treating controls as checkboxes and start treating them as engineered defenses that need to match real threats and real human behavior. That mindset helps you design controls that are proportionate, realistic, and resilient, which is exactly what privacy management needs as systems and organizations evolve. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at CIPM in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful starting point is to understand why control types matter in the first place. If you pick the wrong type of control for a risk, you can end up feeling protected while actually being exposed. For example, if your main risk is that too many people can access sensitive data, a training program alone will not reliably reduce that risk, because training depends on everyone behaving perfectly every day. Training can help, but the risk calls for stronger access restrictions and monitoring. On the other hand, if your main risk is that a process is unclear and people make inconsistent decisions, a technical control might not solve it if the underlying rules are not defined. In that case, you need governance and procedures to set the boundary before technology can enforce it. Control types matter because they are tools with different jobs, and privacy management is a tool selection discipline. You choose controls the way an engineer chooses materials, based on what the problem demands and what the environment will stress over time. Once you see controls as tools rather than as promises, the rest of the topic becomes much easier. One common way to classify controls is by their purpose: preventive, detective, and corrective. Preventive controls are designed to stop an unwanted event from happening in the first place, like restricting access so only authorized roles can view a dataset. Detective controls are designed to reveal that something suspicious or wrong has happened, like logs and alerts that show unusual access patterns or bulk exports. Corrective controls are designed to limit harm and restore a safe state after something goes wrong, like incident response procedures, account disablement, and data recovery. The reason this classification is useful is that many privacy incidents are not fully preventable because systems are complex and humans make mistakes. A program that relies only on prevention often fails quietly, because when prevention fails, there is no detection and no response capacity. A program that relies only on detection can become a noisy alarm system that watches harm happen without stopping it. A mature program balances all three, recognizing that resilience comes from layered purpose, not from a single ideal control. Another practical classification is by control form: technical, administrative, and organizational. Technical controls are implemented in systems, such as encryption, access control, segmentation, and automated deletion. Administrative controls are implemented through processes and procedures, such as approvals, reviews, documentation requirements, and change management. Organizational controls are implemented through people and structure, such as roles, training, accountability, and internal oversight. The value of this classification is that it reveals where a control depends on human attention versus where it can operate automatically. Technical controls tend to be strong at scale because they enforce rules consistently, but they can also be brittle if misconfigured or if the rules are unclear. Administrative controls can be flexible and can adapt to complex decisions, but they can be slow and can fail when people bypass them under pressure. Organizational controls shape culture and incentives, but culture shifts slowly and can be undermined by turnover. A strong privacy program does not choose one form and ignore the others. because each form covers limitations in the others. When you understand form, you start designing control sets rather than isolated controls. Now let's talk about strengths, because controls are attractive for different reasons. Technical preventive controls are strong because they reduce reliance on memory and good intentions. If a system requires multi-factor authentication, it makes certain attacks harder regardless of whether a user is tired or distracted. If access is restricted by role, it prevents casual browsing of sensitive records. Administrative controls are strong because they create deliberation for decisions that should not be automatic, such as approving a new data use or adding a new vendor. They force people to justify why they need data and what safeguards they will apply, which reduces reuse drift. Organizational controls are strong because they make privacy expectations part of how people think and behave, which helps in situations where technology cannot enforce everything, like how someone speaks to a customer or how a manager approves a request. Detective controls are strong because they create visibility, and visibility is what allows accountability. If you cannot see what happened, you cannot prove compliance or learn from failures. Strength is not about one control being superior. It is about knowing what job the control does well. Limitations are where control design becomes honest, because every control has a way it can disappoint you. Technical controls can fail through misconfiguration, poor integration, or being applied inconsistently across systems. A database might be encrypted, but exports might not be, and the export becomes the weak point. Access control might be well designed, but privileged service accounts might bypass it. Administrative controls can fail through rubber stamping, where approvals become routine and no one reads the details. They can also fail through bypass, where teams move fast and treat procedures as optional. Organizational controls can fail through drift, where leadership priorities change and people stop taking privacy seriously, or through uneven adoption, where some teams embrace controls and others ignore them. Detective controls can fail through noise, where too many alerts cause people to ignore them, or through blind spots, where logging does not capture the right events. Corrective controls can fail through lack of practice, where incident response procedures exist, but no one knows how to execute them under pressure. Privacy management must design with limitations in mind, because a control that fails predictably can often be strengthened, but a control that fails unexpectedly can cause severe harm. Failure modes are worth studying because they show you what to watch for over time. A classic failure mode for preventive controls is scope gaps, where the control applies in one place, but not in another place where data also exists. For example, a retention policy might delete records from the main system, but not from logs, backups, or analytics stores. A classic failure mode for administrative controls is informal work, where teams share data through spreadsheets and email because the formal process is too slow. A classic failure mode for organizational controls is turnover, where trained employees leave and new employees do not receive the same guidance, causing inconsistent practices. A classic failure mode for detective controls is missing baselines, where the organization cannot tell what is abnormal because it never defined what normal looks like. A classic failure mode for corrective controls is incomplete containment, where an incident is addressed in one system, but the same vulnerability remains elsewhere. These failure modes are not hypothetical. They are patterns that recur because organizations are busy and systems are complex. Recognizing patterns helps you prioritize improvement without needing to wait for a crisis. Another important idea is that controls can interact in ways that either strengthen or weaken the overall program. A preventive access control becomes stronger when paired with detective logging that records access and alerts on unusual behavior. A retention control becomes stronger when paired with an inventory process that ensures systems are in scope and with verification reports that show deletion jobs actually ran. A vendor contract clause becomes stronger when paired with ongoing oversight that checks whether the vendor's practices match the promises. Conversely, controls can weaken each other when they create false confidence. A policy that says data will be deleted can create complacency if no one verifies deletion. A training program can create complacency if leaders assume training means behavior is perfect and therefore technical controls are unnecessary. A certification or audit report can create complacency if teams treat it as proof that risk is gone rather than as evidence that controls existed at a point in time. Privacy management is not only about selecting controls, but about composing them so that each control supports and validates the others. Composition is what creates durability. It is also useful to recognize that controls should be proportionate, because over-controlling can create its own failure modes. If a process is so restrictive that teams cannot get work done, they will find ways around it, and the work will become invisible and uncontrolled. If access controls are too broad because the organization wants to avoid friction, risk increases through unnecessary access. If logging is too detailed and captures unnecessary personal data, it can create privacy risk inside the monitoring system itself. Proportionate control design means matching the strength of the control to the sensitivity and scale of the data and to the likely harm. It also means designing workflows that make the secure path the easy path, so compliance feels natural rather than burdensome. When control design respects real work constraints, controls are more likely to be followed and maintained. Privacy management is successful when controls are both protective and usable. Another beginner misunderstanding is thinking that control maturity is mostly about having more controls. In reality, maturity is often about making fewer controls work reliably. A simple access control that is consistently applied and reviewed can reduce more risk than a complex set of policies that no one follows. A clear retention schedule with automated deletion and verification can be more valuable than a detailed retention policy that depends on manual cleanup. A practiced incident response plan with clear roles can be more valuable than a long incident response document that no one has rehearsed. Maturity comes from reliability, measurement, and improvement. Controls become mature when they are tested, when failures are documented, and when fixes are implemented across the environment. Privacy management should therefore ask not only what controls exist, but how they are maintained, how they are validated, and how the organization learns when they fail. Learning is a control in itself because it prevents the same incident from repeating. As we close, understanding control types is about building a realistic, engineering-style mindset in privacy management. Controls exist to reduce risk, but they do different jobs, and you must choose them based on purpose, such as prevention, detection, and correction. Controls also differ in form, such as technical, administrative, and organizational, and each form has strengths and limitations that affect reliability. Failure modes like scope gaps, rubber stamping, bypass behavior, drift, noise, and lack of practice are predictable patterns you can watch for and address early. The strongest privacy programs compose controls so they reinforce each other, and they design controls to be proportionate and usable so people follow them under real-world pressure. When you can look at a control and ask what it is meant to do, how it could fail, and what evidence would prove it is working, you are thinking like a privacy manager. That perspective makes every later topic easier, because privacy management is ultimately the craft of turning good intentions into reliable protection.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.